You know that feeling when you open your bank app and your stomach drops? Not because you did something crazy, not because you're irresponsible, but because the number is smaller than it should be, and you can't even explain where it went. Now imagine the opposite. You open the app, and instead of immediately closing it like it's a jump scare, you actually feel calm. You don't do the can I afford groceries and gas in the same week math? You don't brace for the next surprise charge. You just look at the number and think, okay, I'm fine. There's a specific milestone where that shift happens, and it's not the one most people chase. People think the magic number is a six-figure salary, or $1 million, or once I finally make more. But for most normal adults, the first life-changing money milestone is much smaller. It's $20,000. Not because $20,000 makes you rich, it doesn't, but because $20,000 changes your relationship with money in a way almost nothing else can. I'm Miles, and this is Miles' Money Audit, where we read the fine print on real-life money so you stop getting overcharged by your own life. Today we're talking about the $20,000 buffer, why it changes your brain, your decisions, and your ability to build wealth without pretending you need to be a millionaire to feel stable. And before you roll your eyes and say, Miles, 20 grand is impossible, stay with me, because the point isn't to shame you. The point is to show you why this milestone matters and how to reach it with a system, not motivation. Here's the big idea. Money doesn't change in a smooth, gentle line. It changes in thresholds. There are invisible barriers where the game feels impossible until suddenly it feels easier. Think of it like pushing something heavy uphill. At the bottom, you're straining, you're slipping. Every step feels like it doesn't count. Then you finally build momentum, and at some point, the weight doesn't feel the same anymore. You're still pushing, but now it's moving. That first momentum milestone, for most adults, is a buffer big enough that life stops knocking you over every month. For many households, that buffer is around $20,000 because it roughly represents 3 to 6 months of core living expenses. And the magic isn't just the math. The magic is what happens in your head. When you don't have a buffer, your brain is in what I call fragile mode. Fragile mode means you make decisions based on fear. You accept bad deals because you can't risk saying no. You can't plan long term because the short term keeps attacking you. In fragile mode, one surprise expense isn't just an annoyance, it's a threat. A bill hits early, a tire pops, a kid needs something, a subscription renews, your rent jumps, and suddenly you're rearranging your whole month. This is why people who look fine on paper still feel broke. It's not only income, it's lack of margin. Margin is what turns emergencies into inconveniences. And $20,000 is a milestone because it's often the first time your margin becomes real. Let's make that concrete. When you have basically no savings, your financial world is made of traps. A small problem becomes a big problem because you can't fix it early. A timing issue becomes a fee. A mistake becomes interest. A surprise becomes stress. But with a buffer, the exact same events stop controlling you. Your car needs a repair? Annoying, but you pay it and move on. A bill hits at a weird time? Fine, you float it without panic. You lose a week of income? You adjust, you don't collapse. Here's the Miles rule. The first job of money isn't to grow, it's to stop you from bleeding. Because when you stop bleeding, you finally have space to build. That's why the psychological shift is so huge. Without a buffer, you ask, how do I survive until payday? With a buffer, you start asking, how do I improve my life over the next year? And that question changes everything. It changes how you work. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what deals you accept. It changes how you spend. You become less reactive and more strategic. And then the math starts to help you too, because once you've built a buffer, you stop paying the stupid taxes of being fragile. Overdraft fees, late fees, rushed purchases, high-interest fixes, convenient spending from exhaustion and panic. Those aren't moral failings. They're the cost of living without margin. A buffer reduces those costs, and that reduction is a raise. Most people underestimate how powerful that is. Now let's talk about the money side. A lot of people hear $20,000 and think investing, but the milestone isn't about becoming Warren Buffett. The milestone is about scale. At small numbers, progress feels slow because your savings is doing all the work. At bigger numbers, your money starts contributing. If you invest $1,000 and it grows, you feel nothing. If you invest $20,000 and it grows, you feel the difference, not because the strategy changed, because the scale did. Even a modest return on $20,000 creates real movement. But here's the more important part. To reach $20,000 from zero, you need a system. And if you can build that system once, you can build it again. That identity shift is the real asset. You become the kind of person who tracks money without fear, makes trade-offs intentionally, delays gratification when it matters, doesn't panic spend because life got stressful. That's not self-help, that's a practical skill. Now let's address the real objection. Okay, Miles, sounds great. How do I actually get there? You don't get there by obsessing over coffee. You get there by winning the big categories and automating the rest. And you don't need a perfect budget. You need a buffer plan. Here's the plan that works for most adults. First, set the target correctly. The target is not $20,000 because Miles said so. The target is 3 months of core expenses, then 6 months if you can. Core expenses means housing, utilities, transportation to work, groceries, minimum debt payments, basic insurance. Not lifestyle, not vacations, not the nice version, the survive and keep working version. Add that number up. For a lot of people, 3 months lands somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000, and 6 months might land around $20,000 to $40,000. So $20,000 isn't a magic number because it's pretty, it's a common point where the buffer becomes thick enough to change your behavior. Second, define the method. Most people fail at saving because they treat saving like a mood. They save when they feel responsible. Then life happens and the mood disappears. So we're going to treat saving like a bill. Miles' rule: if saving is optional, it won't happen. If it's automatic, it becomes normal. You pick a weekly or payday amount and you automate it. Even $50 a week is $2,600 a year. $100 a week is $5,200 a year. $200 a week is $10,400 a year. The point is momentum. But we can speed it up by using what I call the big 3 levers. Lever 1, housing. Lever 2, transportation. Lever 3, fixed monthly leaks. If you want to buffer fast, you don't need 10 tiny cuts. You need one meaningful shift. Transportation is a huge one. If you're paying a massive car payment because it fits the monthly budget, that payment is literally stealing your buffer. And housing is the biggest one of all. I'm not saying move tomorrow. I'm saying recognize the truth. If your housing is too high, the buffer becomes almost impossible, because every extra dollar is already pre-spent. So the buffer plan has 2 tracks. Track A, what you can do right now without moving. Track B, your next big move that unlocks savings capacity. Track A is about plugging leaks and building momentum. Track B is about choosing a life setup that allows wealth building. Most people only do Track A. They tighten everything, feel deprived, and then rebound. Track B is where the real change happens, because it reduces your baseline costs. Now here's the part people love. When you hit the buffer milestone, you stop caring about small purchases as much. Not because you became careless, because you became stable. When you're fragile, every dollar feels like a threat, so you waste mental energy debating small stuff. When you have margin, you stop spending brainpower on $3 problems, and you spend it on $30,000 decisions. Where you live, what you drive, what you automate, what you invest in, what job you accept. That shift is what wealthy people mean when they say, think big picture. It's not that they're smarter, it's that their brain isn't on fire. Now the career part. A buffer changes your relationship with work in a way people don't talk about enough. When you're paycheck to paycheck, you're negotiating from desperation. You can't walk away. You can't risk a change. You can't push back. But when you have a real buffer, you gain what I call walking away power. Not because you want to quit your job dramatically, but because you can survive long enough to choose better. Walking away power changes everything. You interview without panic. You ask for the raise because no won't kill you. You stop tolerating nonsense because you're not trapped. And here's the weird part. Often you never have to use the buffer. Just having it changes how you show up. You become calmer, more confident, more strategic, and that makes you more valuable. That's a positive feedback loop. Buffer, better decisions, more income, more buffer. Now we need the warning, because this is where people mess up. They hit a milestone like $20,000, feel relief for the first time in years, and then they treat the buffer like a reward. They upgrade their lifestyle, they buy something big, they finally breathe, and the buffer disappears. Don't do that. The buffer isn't a prize, it's a tool. It's the thing that keeps you from going back to fragile mode. Miles' rule: never spend your buffer to feel rich. Use your buffer so you can stay stable, because stability is the foundation that allows wealth to grow. So here's what to do once you reach it. You maintain the buffer and you redirect your monthly saving into wealth building. That could be retirement accounts, index funds, debt payoff, if the interest is high. Whatever fits your risk and goals. But the order matters. First, you stop bleeding. Then you build. Now let's make this practical. If you're trying to build your first $20,000, here's the simplest playbook. Step 1. Define your number. 3 months of core expenses. Write it down. Step 2. Automate a weekly amount. Even if it's small, momentum first. Step 3. Do one leak kill. Cancel the stuff you don't use. Reduce one fixed bill. Renegotiate one insurance line. Pick one category where you can save $50 to $200 monthly. Step 4. Pick one big lever to change over the next 6 to 12 months. Transportation or housing, not both at once. 1. Step 5. Protect the buffer with rules. No dipping for wants. No, I'll replace it later. The buffer is sacred. And here's the part that matters most. If you're at zero, the first $1,000 is the hardest money you'll ever save. The first $5,000 is hard. The first $10,000 is hard. But it gets easier because you start buying time and stability with every dollar. This is why that milestone feels like a turning point. It's not because you're suddenly rich. It's because you're not fragile anymore. And once you stop being fragile, you stop getting overcharged by life. If you want a simple challenge, do this. For the next 30 days, treat buffer building like the most important bill you pay. Not because you're trying to be perfect, because you're trying to become resilient. This is Miles' Money Audit. Read the fine print. Keep your money.